who had volunteered for my dad at age 17 and went on to be a 5-year Texas GOP state chair and recently became a senior advisor to my presidential campaign. While I was completing my ophthalmology residency at the Duke University School of Medicine, my wife Kelly and I founded and chaired a watchdog group called North Carolina Taxpayers Union, which kept track of state politicians' spending and pork. Each year we'd publish the ratings. We were 27-year-old newlyweds working long and crazy hours, me as a first-year resident in ophthalmology at Duke, and Kelly working in marketing communications for Nortel Networks in Research Triangle Park. I drove to the legislative library in Raleigh whenever I had free time, poured through massive logs of the legislative votes taken, and created a rating system based on how each representative had voted on the major spending bills and tax bills for each session. This was long before any of this information was available on the internet, so it was tedious and time-consuming. I talked Kelly into writing our pamphlet copy and creating a layout for the ratings. Not an easy feat, since she was already working long hours and traveling across the country for Nortel. We held meetings in our house and persuaded all of our friends, most of whom were other young Duke resident physician couples, to join our group. Also not an easy feat, since most of them were too busy and frazzled to even think about politics. But we usually included beer, pizza, and Duke basketball on TV, which enticed plenty of new converts. Walter Jones was a state representative then and an advisor to the group. Walter would go on to win a seat in Congress and become one of my father's best friends in Congress. At the end of the state legislative sessions, Kelly and I would go up to the state capitol in Raleigh and hand out report cards to the state lawmakers. Last year, when I was campaigning for Tom Tillis, the newly minted senator from North Carolina, a man came up with an NCTU scorecard from 1992 and asked me to sign it. The Taxpayers Union was my first foray into politics on my own, and even I was surprised by its success and attention we were able to draw. We made contacts with concerned people from all over the state. One particularly active group was strongly opposed to the idea of a food tax. Within 6 months of forming NCTU, both the local nightly news and Raleigh and Durham papers had covered us. Across North Carolina, candidates used our ratings to run against big spending incumbents. In a photo from the Raleigh papers, we are standing on the Capitol steps with a rented podium and microphone. Kelly and her black Ray-Ban Wayfarers, we look like kids. We were. Looking back, I think that our accomplishments with the Taxpayers Union taught us both an important lesson: that a single person with an idea and the passion, drive, and energy to put it into action can make a difference. When I finished my ophthalmology training at Duke, Kelly and I moved to Bowling Green, Kentucky, about 30 miles from Russellville, where Kelly's parents live. There, we formed a new taxpayer group called Kentucky Taxpayers United and produced a taxpayer scorecard with which we rated state legislators once again. By then, however, most of my attention was focused on my young family and the beginnings of my career as a physician. Physicians have a unique way of looking at life. In medicine, we first diagnose the problem and then go about implementing the remedy based on facts, not preconceptions. I came to find that such linear thinking doesn't happen all that often in the halls of Congress. We pass 1,000-page bills that no one has read. I work in a city where logic is the exception. We can't even pass things we agree on. I couldn't even get a vote on a bill that I co-sponsored with Harry Reid. When I think of how screwed up Washington is, I think of a Groucho Marx quote. "The art of politics," he said, "is looking for problems everywhere, finding them, misdiagnosing them, and applying the wrong remedies." While members of Congress spend their time blowing hot air at one another across the aisle, the president and his administration make a mockery of the separation of branches, as defined in the Constitution. There is likely no greater problem we face than the executive branch usurping power that was assigned to the legislative branch. In some ways, Congress is to blame, as Congress leaves the power it's supposed to assume lying on the ground for the president to just vacuum up. Still, this president has gone further to collapse the separation of powers than any of his predecessors. If the executive branch can initiate war, if it can detain citizens without a trial, if it can amend legislation, if it can declare Congress to be in recess, then government, unrestrained by law, becomes nothing short of tyranny.